today's session is focused on strategic human resource management. I'm sure that you would be aware that this is from the core textbook, Human Resource Management, a Global and Critical Perspective. And the contents of this chapter, if not completely in the main, they have been taken from the chapter number 2, which has been written by Fida Afuni and Dima Jamali of American University of Beirut. So in terms of the learning outcomes, what we are hoping to achieve in today's session is we should be able to recognize the strategic role of human resource management in managing people, employees and managers in organizations in order to enable them to achieve strategic objectives of an organization. So we would discuss some underlying theories of strategic human resource management. We would also refer to some organizational examples, some real life organizational examples. So here is a brief outline. We will start with the introduction. We would also see how human resource management as a field has evolved from personnel management to human resource management to strategic human resource management. So there is a roadmap of evolution, which I would very briefly share with you. We would also discuss the key underlying theories and their potential contribution. Some examples would be offered, critical analysis and discussion. And if we had some time, we would also discuss the end of chapter case study, insights from Deloitte, Middle East experience, strategic human resource management lens, of course. So as I mentioned in a previous lecture that the field of human resource management, it has been evolving in the past 4 or 5 decades. And 2 major transformations, or 2 major changes have been noticed. One transition was the transition of human resource management from the personnel management or the traditional personnel management to human resource management. And the second important transition was the introduction of strategic human resource management, where human resource management has to more boldly and more explicitly it has to play a strategic role in organizations. And perhaps the third key transformation, which is currently taking place, which has not really taken place so much in Pakistan, but surely in the West, there is a lot of discussion and a lot of attention to this topic, is talent management, or talent management in a global context. So these are 3 key transformations which we can notice in the past 3 to 5 decades. So from personnel management to strategic human resource management, there is an evolutionary roadmap. There is a history of transition. Of course, the traditional focus of management was on scientific management. And from scientific management, the transition took place that look, instead of treating and approaching employees as mechanical resources, we also have to look at their behavioral aspects, and we also have to take care of their motivation and engagement with the organization. And therefore, the human relations school emerged. More formally, in the past 3 decades, human resource management, the field of human resource management evolved, but it evolved with a functional focus. So for example, there would be a focus on recruitment and selection as a function, but then there would also be a focus on performance management as a function, and on training and development as a function, and on reward management or on compensation management as a function. In 1990s, the globalization with the advances in communication and transportation technology, it really confronted organizations and countries around the world there was increased competition in the industry and in organizations, and therefore there was a more emphasis on strategic human resource management. So that is also something which is which we also discuss in our next slide. So you would notice that here in this slide, we would see that, and this is taken from Guest 1987 scholarship, that there are key differences between traditional personnel management and human resource management. So historically, personnel management was more short-term, more reactive, more ad hoc, and it was more marginal than a core function or a core department in organizations. In contrast, human resource management was expected to have more long-term orientation, to be more proactive than reactive in terms of identifying, being able to identify and address employee and employment challenges and preempt them instead of react to them, and be more strategic and integrated within organizational plans and strategy. In terms of psychological contract between the employee and the employer, between the people and the organization, the traditional personnel management's emphasis was more on compliance and conformance, that whatever instructions have been given, whatever policies have been issued by the organization, they have to be followed by the employees. Whereas the human resource management's emphasis is on commitment, that look, yes, we have hired you, but at the same time, we value you. We value you not only as a skillful resource, but we also value you as a human being. And therefore, we are more interested in your continued commitment and engagement with the organization. In terms of controls, the emphasis of personnel management was more on external control, more on monitoring, and more on, for example, enforcement of disciplinary processes. Whereas human resource management, since the emphasis was on commitment, so the control had to also come from the inside of the person because of their continued commitment. From an employee relations perspective, personnel management looked at people as a collective. So, for example, negotiation with the collection of individuals, such as with trade unions or associations of officers. Whereas within the human resource management, the emphasis was on individual, that each individual would be treated as a different human being with their own unique preferences and anxieties and concerns, which have to be addressed on a one-on-one basis. The preferred structure or system within personnel management was very centralized, very formalized and defined roles, very bureaucratic, whereas within human resource management, it was more flexible and it was more organic. Roles evaluation or criteria in personnel management was on cost minimization, and that only human resource department or personnel department would be responsible for certain core functions, for example, payroll management. Whereas from an HRM perspective, all line managers, whether they are marketing managers or production managers or HR managers in his or her own department, they would be responsible for the management of employees within their respective department. And the emphasis was on the maximization of utilization of employees. So look, these were the two, these are some of the key distinction points between personnel management and HRM. As is clear that human resource management is more strategic in its orientation, whereas personnel management is more reactive. Well, you can also take a look at this figure, which shows the strategic role versus operational focus orientation of human resources. So on the upper half of this 2x2 matrix would show that strategic orientation of human resource, where human resource department or human resource director or human resource executives, they are seen as not only strategic partners of an organization, but they are also seen as change agents. If the organization is implementing certain change, if the employer is implementing certain change in the organization, whether in the shape of technology, whether in the shape of acquisition or merger, whether in the shape of exploring new markets, whether in the shape of designing and marketing new product, all of this is part of a change. So HR also has to play the role of a change agent in facilitating that change. But also HR is expected to play the role of a strategic partner, where instead of being the passive recipient of the strategic plan, which has been made by, for example, CEO or CFO or CEO, HR also has to play a role in advising them and participating in strategic planning meetings. So these are the strategic orientations of the HR role. But there is also a day-to-day or operational orientation where the HR would play the role of administrative experts. So for example, if it comes to discipline of employees, if it comes to payroll of employees, if it comes to, for example, health and safety or insurance facilities provision of employees. So the role of administrative expert would also be played by the HR. But HR at the same time would also play the role of employee champion. So HR would also ensure that, that if there are any concerns or preferences or anxieties of employees, they have to be addressed by the organization in an adequate manner. Of course, in a manner which makes it viable, economically, financially, and politically viable for the organization. So HR also has to play the role of employee champion. So these are, if we look at from the vertical side, the top vertical would be strategic orientation, and the bottom vertical would be the day-to-day or the operational orientation of HR. But we can also then segregate it in terms of, for example, horizontal, if we were to integrate it. So the right-hand side, if we take the right-hand side of the vertical line, is the softer side, whereas the left-hand side is the harder side or the process side of human resource management. So the process side, once again, is strategic partner and administrative expert, which is hard HR, whereas soft HR is the change agent and the employee champion, which is to do with the employee motivation and employee engagement and employee participation. So this is also another view which I thought that I should share with you of the roles of HR in any organization. Once again, taking the conversation forward of traditional personnel management, as you can see, figure 2.1, TPM is basically traditional personnel management, and SHRM is strategic human resource management. So you can see from this figure 2.1, that TPM, traditional personnel management, is bureaucratic and reactive in its orientation. Human resource management situated somewhere in the middle, and it has more tactical orientation, whereas strategic human resource management, as the name indicates, has a strategic orientation. It should be, and it is expected to be strategically proactive. So this means that instead of waiting for the problems to emerge and the problems to develop, the strategic human resource management would be proactive and would be preempt any problems related to employees' preferences or concerns, or employee productivity and their alignment with the strategic objectives in a strategic manner. Okay, so let's go to the definitional side. Strategy is a plan of action which is designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim of an organization. So within an organizational context, maybe we may be looking at 5 years, 10 years, even more, the strategic objectives of an organization. And strategic HR is management of HR in a way that supports an organization's long-term business goals and outcomes. So we have decided, for example, that in this specific company, we will increase our sales by 100% in the next 5 years. Now the role of HR is to identify that in order to increase the sale by 100%, what kind of changes would be needed in human resource management. So for example, how many more marketing managers would be needed, and how many more sales officers would be needed, and what kind of skill profile would we be needing in the next 5 years, or in the next 3 years, or in the next 10 years. And if there are any current gaps in the current configuration of HR within our organization, how could those gaps be addressed? So that is the strategic human resource management perspective. Now I would like all of you to spend the next 10 minutes in your own breakout rooms in order to study this mini case. There is a mini case study on algorithm good strategic alignment. It is taken from chapter number 2 of the textbook, which has already been allocated to you. If you have not been able to access the chapter, I would be very disappointed if you do not have access to this chapter. But in any case, you are very welcome to take a screenshot of this screen so that you could refer to this in a ready manner when you are discussing this case in your breakout room. Within the breakout room, I would like you to focus on these 2 questions. The first question is, how does the human resource department at Algorithm help to accomplish its business goals? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is use figure 2.1 to evaluate the role of HR department at Algorithm in terms of its strategic operational orientation, as well as proactive or reactive orientation. So the figure which is referred to here is figure 2.1, once again from your chapter. So let me send all of you to the breakout room for 10 minutes.